Dune 2 is gas. That's all I have written down. So,
All right.
all right, let's make our water of life. 2 shots of vodka.
Holy fuck, dude.
It's actually not too bad.
It tastes like vodka to me. Just straight vodka.
Yeah, you can't taste the berry.
All right, welcome. We're talking about Dune 2 today and probably Dune 1 as well, just because I watched it right before watching Dune 2, so I have a lot on my mind as to what I was thinking while watching it. So it will kind of go back and forth and probably focus on Dune 2 for the most part and see where we're at.
In my opinion, it is one 6-hour movie. Like the way the second one picks up 30 seconds maybe after the first. I mean, the transition there is very quick. So, and the director's even talked about it, that in his opinion, it was like he wanted, which it sucks that Warner Brothers did this to him because he wanted it to be like he wanted part 1 and then part 2 to come out within months.
So let's talk about part 1 a little bit then.
Yeah.
This is my biggest takeaway is that Dune 2 is a good movie. I think the real problem lies with Dune 1 being a mid movie.
Dune 1 it has a similar issue that the recent Spider-Verse movie had, where it doesn't finish. It's not a whole movie. It's the plot points that it sets up, it doesn't resolve until, and for us, I guess you were lucky enough to not have seen the first one until recently, but for me, I finished the first one and was like, well, that looked really cool, but there was no payoff for the stuff that it sets up. You know, the Harkonens take over. Timothy's in the desert. He's having all these visions, but then it doesn't go anywhere.
I think the ultimate takeaway I had with it is like, it could have really been cut down into like 45 minutes, and then you just give us one Dune movie with all of it in there, and I feel like that would have been fantastic because you could add.
I might argue against that because Dune is. I mean, I didn't read the book, but I have seen a lot that it is a very dense book. So apparently, like the first one, from what I've heard, is fairly like frame to frame with the book. And so I don't think it would have, all of the setup, the Harkonnen invasion, them being sentenced to Arrakis, the setup of Arrakis.
No, I agree. That's great, but I think like halfway through, or at some point, it really falls off. Also, combat in Dune 1 is terrible compared to Dune 2.
You think so? I think it was solid. I mean, like the scene with Jason Momoa, you know, hitting that thing and then dying. Spoiler alert. Can we? This is spoilers, right?
Yeah, this is spoilers.
Okay. Spoilers right here.
Yeah, I mean, like you should see Dune 1 by now if you're watching a movie about Dune 2.
It's been out for 3 years.
I would assume.
Dune 1 very much like. No, yeah, like you said, like after the Harkonnens invade, which is pretty funny too. The first time I watched it, I wasn't looking at the runtime at all, so I didn't realize that's like the climax of the movie.
Yeah,
like it's happening 2.5 hours into it, and you're like, oh shit.
I'm gonna be honest. We're still on Dune 1. I didn't really care about the mother's plotline at all.
Yeah, it was very like, I mean, granted, it pays off a lot more in Dune 2.
Yeah,
but
that's what I'm saying. Like a lot of like the setup and. Maybe I'm going to stand by it. I think like you do the setup to them getting attacked, and then after that point, like a lot of it is just
they're just in the desert, you know.
Because there's parts in Dune 2 to where you're like, okay, like you know what I mean. I get.
I think you could have. I agree. I think you could have ended Dune Part 1 maybe at like the 2-hour mark, end with the Harkonnen invasion, and then maybe have Dune Part 2 condense it just a little bit and then throw in that whole segment of Timothy in the desert, Timothy and his mom in the desert, because that does play into the second one a lot more than it plays into the first one.
Yeah, I feel like that's probably why when people watch the first one, there was like the story of like the old lady saying like that's it after watching the first one. You know what I mean?
Because
they could have cut it. Because here's the thing, and we'll start getting into Dune 2 now. Is Dune 2 is pretty fucking sick, like all around. I feel like
it's an amazing.
I feel like one thing they did really well is like the Harkonnens bring a lot of contrast to being in the desert for
almost literally when it comes to their planet. Like
you have the scenes where it's like black and white. So.
Which did you know that that's shot in camera? It looks like that when they're in camera. They did not put a filter on it. They did not just put a black and white. They used an infrared lens to basically, like, I think it did something to the colors that just made it look black and white.
That's pretty cool.
That's one thing about the movie that I respect a lot. as you could tell, so much of it is done practically.
Hmm.
Like, obviously, you know, these giant worms are not practical, but there's shots of them like on what is the equivalent of the worm's back, and
Right.
that little part of the worm's back is practical, and it really reflects in the quality of the movie because like it looks like they're actually riding on a worm's back because within the camera they are riding on a worm's back.
I have a note.
Yeah.
Just to jump in about riding on worm's back. And this is pretty heavy deep into the movie. But the point to where they're all riding sandworms 10 in a row to finish
Yeah.
off the movie.
Yeah.
How did they do that?
They got
Can anyone explain that to
because
me?
like the whole series we've just seen like one worm at a time. Like
Yeah.
it's safe to assume they're thousands of kilometers apart.
Sure, but like, what do you set up 10 thumpers all in a row and then 10? How did they get 10 sandworms riding in sync to battle?
Maybe they were like positioned elsewhere on the planet. You got one guy here, one guy here, one guy here. They got, I guess they don't have walkies.
Secondly, we're still on sandworms, okay? Because I just have questions about this entire universe.
I actually looked up a lot about sandworms after the movie, so I'm the sandworm expert right
Sure.
here. Bubba, Kitty Boy GG, Kitty Boy TV, sandworm expert.
How do they get multiple people onto the sandworms?
That bothered me. Like they're in like that little hut. How did y'all put that on the worm's back?
That's what I'm saying. And the mom is riding comfortably on the sandworm in like this tent. And from our experience of watching Mr. Chalamet jump on
the worm, it's going through, and he's having to leap onto it.
It's a pretty
and, like,
intense experience. Granted, they
he's
say
telling
it's like
me this 8-month pregnant lady fucking
yeah
leaped onto the worm, like every single one of them, like, and especially when it's this rite of passage, like clearly a lot of them don't know how to ride the worm, so that very much bothered me, I will say. Like I was watching it like, how's she on there?
They say it's a grandfather worm, the one that Timmy jumps on. So
True. It is a big, fairly large worm.
I'm going to refer to Timothy Chalamet as Timmy for the most part because it just comes naturally to me.
I'm going to refer to him as Wonka.
I feel like a lot of what I liked about the movie for Dune 2 came in like the last 40 minutes to where things are really starting to climax, and you got fucking space knights with long swords holding out like this. I was like, that's awesome.
The ending of the movie, it's kind of the pinnacle of like a climactic battle, like with the way that they like this basically 5-hour setup that we've had to it, if you include the parts from Dune 1.
Right.
The 5-hour setup we've had to a climactic battle. What better way to do it than 3 giant sandworms coming in and just destroying everything?
Was it only 3? I think it was. I remember vividly in my head. It was a line like.
I think it was like actually 5 or 6, because the poster that looks like the Chihuahua.
Right.
That one, there's 3, and then people made the like little Chihuahua joke, but I definitely think that there were like 5 or 6 at least. But it sets up, and the way the Fremen fight too, like it's so cool. I love watching almost like underdog fighters.
Sure.
Like they're clearly going against a technology that's much better than theirs, and they're fucking them up. They're on home team advantage to the max. They're hiding in the sand. They're hiding, like they know how to use the worms to their advantage. They know the spots to hide in. It's so cool watching them fight and overcome these basically more intelligent, not more intelligent, but more sophisticated and technologically advanced groups of people.
Sure.
Like,
yeah. And I'll give credit where credit's due. I'm not a sand person. You know what I mean? Like desert. Hear me out. Like desert.
You're not like Anakin Skywalker. You don't like sand.
Yeah, exactly. like desert climate type deal. Because people are.
It's not your thing.
I'll give you an example. All right. There's a game called Morrowind. A part of the Elder Scrolls series.
Yeah, fantastic.
And people are in love with it. I think it's the ugliest game I've ever seen in my life.
I see what you mean. I think I'm picking up what you're putting down. Sand is hard to make look good.
I just think I don't really like fuck with the atmosphere that
Of like
much.
a
So
desert
yeah,
environment.
so I'm like giving credit where credit's due that they made it cool
They made
because
they made me want to go to the Sahara and start fighting people. I listen.
I want to talk about how much better things look in Dune 2 versus Dune 1. Like just overall. I think that overall the visual consistency, CGI, whatever, got so much better. And we talked about the black and white at the Harkonens, and then
It felt like he was flexing. It felt like he was like, "Here's what I can do with the Marvel movie budget."
yeah, because
Like
it just felt a lot more consistent overall.
the shot when the Emperor's coming in. Spoiler alert. The shot when the Emperor's coming in, and you see the reflection of the like. Do you know what shot I'm talking about? Where you see the reflection of the mountains on this giant like chrome ball.
Yeah, which it's such a funny ship, but
It's such a funny
it
ship,
was
but
pretty cool.
that shot blew my mind. Reflections in CGI is not like I've never done CGI, so I don't fully know, but like there's no way that's easy. And like
No,
it
no
almost
shot.
like it felt like it was filmed practically, which if I'm questioning whether or not your giant chrome spaceship is practical or not, that's something.
Yeah,
Like I was just sitting there and just that shot alone, I was like, Jesus Christ, like
there's
how did y'all do that?
there is
You
one
know?
moment to where the CGI kind of fails me, and they did it in both
Really?
movies. They did it in both movies, and I'll tell you
Interesting.
exactly
Let's
what
see.
part it is.
Yeah.
In Dune 1, and it's always the battle scenes where he has visions of these soldiers fighting each other in the Holy War,
I
and
know
it
what you're
cuts
talking
to
about.
flips of this one guy, and he looks over, and Timothy Chalamet's face
Yep.
is CGI'd in.
Yep.
They do it. They do it again in the second one, except now it's Zendaya, to where, yeah,
I
battle
don't think that was
scene.
CGI though.
It didn't look good.
In the in the
Either
in the
way,
and I will say in Dune 1, I know exactly what you're talking about, and I agree. I think that
what
the
were they
CGI
thinking with
threw me
that?
off a little bit
What
because
were they thinking
it did
with
look
that?
fake.
Yeah,
Like
it
that one
was.
did look fake.
It had to have been.
It had to have been. Like I don't even think those suits were real. I think it was entirely a CGI stunt to double and that like or like a
And a little side tangent, but the suits looked a lot better overall. The whole set design, like as far as like costumes go, looks so much better.
you
in my
could tell
opinion.
that they trusted him a lot more with the second one to make a good movie because this kind of goes into like the reason why. So basically, the budget of this movie was 190 million. The budget of most Marvel movies is about 200 million. They've been looking like shit recently. Same with Star Wars. All of those budgets are about 200 million. The reason this movie looks so much better than those is because the way Marvel movies are shot and a lot of Star Wars and all of those are shot is to do a lot in the post side.
Mhm.
Whereas a lot of what's being done here in Dune 2 is they're making the suits, they're making the worm back. They're committing to a look when they're shooting it and running with that look upon shooting. So they're able to basically like trust that this is going to be the vision and we're deciding it in pre-production versus just picking between concept art of the Spider-Man suit 2 months after you finish shooting it, picking which suit you want him to wear for that scene. They're deciding that in the pre-production phase and then shooting with said suit.
Yeah.
And so it's able to like it looks so much better than the Marvel movies. So they're able to spend a little bit more extra time on a reflection of a giant chrome ball on a mountain shot
Well,
for CGI
yeah.
sake.
In Dune 1, there was a point to where me and Lexi were watching it, and yeah, we just noticed like the armor just looked like cheap overall. Like so, it was a big step up.
Like the giant, like it almost looks like foam.
Yeah, exactly. But
yeah.
and then you get to Dune 2 and you get the space knights and everything looks so like well polished. There was a point to where you have the big battle going on and you're still like, okay, this is CGI soldiers versus CGI soldiers. I don't really care that much. And maybe Marvel has just kind of fucking ruined that for me. Who knows? But
Marvel,
you know what I'm thinking of is it's not even Marvel. It's Aquaman.
just CGI
Yeah,
fest, all
like
underwater,
epic battle simulator. Like,
yeah, literally. Like, and that's why Dune 2 looks so good is because, like I said, they're committing to a look beforehand. So they've basically created these CGI models that they're able to perfect and show that to the producers versus showing kind of a slightly jankier version showing it to producers, and they're like, let's go ahead and do this look instead. And then you have to pay those CGI artists as if they're starting from scratch and haven't done anything yet for their time. And so
it probably comes with just being a sequel too. You have a more refined like vision.
Exactly. And on top of that too, them just trusting Dennis to make a good movie, because that's absolutely what he did, versus they're hiring these, you know, directors and they're like, okay, like we want you to make it, but like we want you to leave a lot of wiggle room for us as the producers after the fact. Whereas in Dune 2, they didn't do that. They just trusted him to make a good movie, and that's exactly what he delivered. And so a lot of the scenes benefit from that. Just the look of them, like he's putting this $190 million to amazing use.
Yeah, and it sounds... Sorry, vodka's coming.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely... I'm feeling it.
It's going to sound bad, but I think a lot of the visual things that I really enjoyed were like off Dune planet stuff, to where like you jump to the Emperor Christopher Walken, which by the way was really fucking funny. It was so funny to see.
I love that he was just Christopher Walken.
Yeah,
he was just Christopher Walken as the Emperor. I thought he would kind of like, which he did lock in a little bit. It felt like one of his more serious roles, but it's still Christopher Walken.
Even Lexi was like, "Who is that again?" I'm like, "Yeah, he's in fucking."
What is it? 7 Psychopaths.
He's in Quentin Tarantino movies as well. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, Christopher Walken was. And just, alone in that, the casting of this movie was fantastic. I mean, Austin Butler did amazingly as the prince.
Yeah.
Florence Pugh did amazingly as the princess, even with the few scenes that she had.
Speaking of casting, I feel like Dune 1, I couldn't get over the fact that they were just casting Timothée Chalamet and Zendaya to stare at each other for 45 minutes. Actually, Zendaya was only in the movie for like 18 minutes.
Zendaya's not
but
she's, the fact that she's like, you know, on the red carpet of Dune 1, you're like, you're watching and you're like, technically you're not even in the movie until the end.
Yeah, like, I checked the time because it's on HBO Max. I checked it. It was
her like runtime.
18 minutes of like towards the end when she actually appears on screen. I checked it. Yeah, 18 minutes of a 2-hour and 40-minute movie, whatever. Yeah.
Florence Pugh's probably the same, if not less, for the second one.
I feel like she had like a pretty big role in the second.
Her role was big,
yeah.
But like, because the scenes of her are actually of her, like as far as like her presence in the world, not just some weird otherworldly vision.
I don't feel like I needed a lot, though. You know?
No, it didn't. And apparently her role in the next one is much bigger or whatever.
If they make a next one, right?
True, because the director has said he's only going to make it if it's good, which I don't even know how that makes sense, because you have to make it for it to know if it's going to be good. But, and he said like, but he has said like, I'm only going to make it if I trust that the script I've written is good, which is very fair, and I respect that, especially because now that part 2 has come out, this feels like a complete story. You can if the third one never got made, I would still feel like I've watched I feel like satisfying 6-hour movie.
I feel like the problem is I would never go back to watch 1. Now that I know the story, like I would just jump straight into 2.
Yeah, like I've seen Dune 1 twice, which, you know, that is something to say about the quality of the movies. I mean, like, because Dune 1 is a well-crafted movie, but as far as its story payoff, like,
this is like, you already know what's going to happen.
Exactly. I've already learned the knowledge that I need. Why not just watch the cool explosions?
If anything, you watch the first 20 minutes just to get like...
Yeah, just to kind of get the vibe in.
Was it Oscar Isaac? Is that his name? Just to,
just because he, in the first one, he did fantastically.
Yeah, I would have loved to see him more. I know it's not part of the story. But...
Yeah, no, he killed it. Rebecca Ferguson killed it.
Jason Momoa looks so weird to me in the movie, though.
I don't like him without a beard. It just, he looks funky without a beard.
We thought he was old. Like, he looked old. You know what I mean? Like someone past their prime trying to fit into a role that they just should not be in.
Yeah.
Anymore. But he's not that old. He's like 40.
He's younger than Oscar Isaac, I'm pretty sure. Younger than Rebecca Ferguson.
It's like, it felt like watching The Expendables.
Yeah.
You're like
an action actor past their prime, especially like when you see him in Aquaman. He looks like, you know, because I will like the DC knows how to frame Jason Momoa. They frame him pretty well in his Aquaman suits and his. It felt like Dennis doesn't know Jason Momoa's angles, so like there's a lot of shots. He looks like he has a double chin almost, but he's like a ripped dude, so you know that he doesn't.
Yeah.
But it's just like the way he has his head, like the kind of slight head tilt down he does. You're like, oh, you got look a little tubby there.
Yeah.
But
yeah. And I mean, you know, I can't say nothing, but it's just kind of like for an action star, you're like, okay.
Yeah, exactly. Especially like his role in which apparently his role in the books is pretty crazy. He gets revived a lot. I don't know if they're gonna do that, but
I doubt it. I think from what I read, like random Reddit comment, you know what I mean? But he said like he wasn't looking to do more than 2 movies.
Yeah,
so.
no, Dennis has said like I want to do Dune and Messiah. I don't care to do the other ones.
I actually have no idea where they're gonna end it off. Like, I'm thinking like maybe like let's talk Star Wars prequel trilogy.
Yeah.
Ended off on the kids being born for Paul. Like
probably, and then just like leave it open ended.
Yeah, exactly.
Which I think would be a good ending. You know, it's like, oh, you know, it could be a sequel, could not. But Dennis isn't going to do it, and if Dennis isn't going to do it, I doubt it's going to be that good because they're not going to trust another director to do it, and then it's going to go into the Marvel movie kind of cycle of leaving a lot of room in post production for change. How is the half worm, half man going to look? You know?
Yeah, I think speaking of Star Wars, I feel like if anything, this proved that them picking 2 different directors for 3 movies was just the worst idea they could have possibly done. But that's a whole nother story.
I want to talk about one sequence in particular that had me. It was pretty early on in the movie, and it's when I decided, oh, this movie is one of the best movies I've ever seen. Which deciding that 45 minutes into a movie is not common, but it's the sequence where they're raiding that like Harkonnen, like. They're fighting the Harkonens, and it's Zendaya and Timothy and all the Fremen, and they're like, you know, she's shooting the rocket launcher and running between the legs.
That's pretty cool.
That scene is so gas, and the shot where she shoots it, you see the explosion, and it cuts to her. No music, barely any sound. You just hear her breathing, and she's running to Timmy, and then right as you see the ship crash, the focus, the way it's framed, and the music kicks back in, like...
Yeah, that's pretty sick moment.
That feeling is great. And to have earned that 45 minutes into a movie, that takes skill.
Was it 45 minutes?
It was not that long into the movie. I mean, I can't see the runtime. It's not anywhere to see. But, like, it was pretty early on in the movie. And just when that happens, I was like, this is crazy. Because that's like... You know, someone who's not creative doesn't need to do that. You know, music still plays, you just leave the track running. But to decide to cut the music and just have her breathing heavily, and then the ship crashes, there's an explosion, and it's a wide shot, and she's running to Timothy, and they have this good character moment between them. Just something about it, like, was just so expertly crafted.
That's how that's kind of the point to realize, okay, this is a bit different from the first one.
Exactly. Like, you realize, oh, I'm watching the fucking shit right now. Like,
yeah. Another thing I think they did better just overall was the combat. I know you said like really before, but
the first one was good. I mean, you know, they really use the shields, and they really don't use the shields a lot.
That's what I like about the second one. Like, they go away from the shields.
Which one thing I do like too is it's also like a plot point. A lot of times they're fighting in the desert. The shields vibrate in such a way that it attracts the worms. Yeah. You don't want to use the shields. So like, not only is it like, you know, the shields look a little wonky, let's take it out. How do we do that and then have it be explained within the plot? Have them fight in the desert. Let me read the book. Yeah, they're fighting in the desert most of the time. Let's do it. Yeah. And so because of that, and then on top of that too, I love scenes where a character powers themselves down to fight on equal footing. Yeah. Austin Butler turning off his shield and being like, yo, let's scrap. That's so gas. That's so cool. Like, Austin Butler's character is a villain, and I'm like, this motherfucker is about the smoke.
I think, yeah.
And that's so cool to me.
You've been fighting the Harkonens for decades.
Load!
My family's been fighting them for centuries.
The Harkonnens were just like such a good point in the movie.
Oh my god, yeah.
They brought a lot to it.
And this is kind of something else relating to the Harkonnens that I wonder, like, it kind of feels like a setup that doesn't have a payoff. Them being Harkonnens, Timothy being a Harkonnen, his mom being a Harkonnen apparently.
Yeah.
Huh?
I think it's just so he has like rightful claim now because they're all dead.
All the Atreides?
Yeah, all of the Harkonnens like that were at least in the top line. Like the Baron died. Austin Butler died.
Austin Butler died. Did Batista die?
Batista died. Yeah, he got.
When did he die?
He got killed by.
Thanos.
Yeah, by Thanos. Yeah, he got killed.
Yeah.
So you're like, there's literally all dead.
Yeah.
So I think the plot point going.
So he has claim to basically marry, and because the Harkonnens, at least the famous Harkonnen family, I guess. Yeah. That does make sense, but it still felt So I guess it does pay off in itself. I just kind of didn't catch. That's kind of why I wanted to watch it again to kind of, because I feel like Dune is one of those both part 1 and 2 really benefit from a second watch. Just so you could see a lot, because that's something that I didn't really pick up on. So I could see a lot of that setup and payoff with the knowledge of already what happens in the payoff. So I'm able to register the fact that this thing set up here does pay off over here.
Right.
Versus just like seeing this and being like, okay, I wonder where this is gonna go, and then I kind of forget that it even happened, and then I'm here and I'm like, oh, okay. But so I do think like Dune is one of those movies, because I know I benefited a lot from watching the first one a second time, because I was able to see, and then especially I had a friend kind of explain the book, so I was able to see a lot of those kind of like setups and then know how it does pay off. Because I watched the first one, had no idea about Dune. Anything related to Dune, I knew Big Worm. That's all I knew. And then I watched it, I was like, that was a movie. It looked pretty cool, but that was a movie. I don't really know how to feel about it. And then a friend explained kind of the books to me, kind of where things go, blah, 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 blah. And then again, I watched the second one after with that knowledge, and it made it a much better movie, for sure, for sure. So I definitely think even just having the knowledge of Dune Part 2 and then watching Dune 1 again, it might even make it a better movie.
Yeah.
Especially because, things pay off, and you can see them set up here and then pay off in this whole other movie that came out 3 years after the fact.
I think Part 2 could have benefited from maybe just changes of pace at different points in the movie. And it's probably the same with the first, right? But I feel like at some points it's slow, and it doesn't really need to be so slow. And then when they go south, things like ramp like this, and there's even cuts
he's
to
drinking the
where
water, he's yelling at, you're a piece of shit,
Yeah.
I'm the motherfucker, and just like you're like, yo, and then they're fighting, and then he's nuking the emperor.
There's a specific scene to where he drinks the worm juice, and then they cut to him talking with his mother, and they cut to him laying down, and they cut to this. I'm like, all right, this is probably the most interesting thing that's happened in the past 10, 15 minutes. You probably
could have dwelled on it a little bit more.
Yeah.
At least to properly set up what's going to be paid off.
And you could view it as artistic vision as well.
Yeah.
The way it was shot was very it was different. You know what I mean?
Very much so. Very much so. That's one thing. I think the story of Dune 2 is solid, but I definitely think the craftsmanship of Dune 2 is really where it,
that's where it shines.
Absolutely, because you see so much of that, everything looks real. For one, you're watching Ant-Man Quantumania, and you're like, but
I thought that, because I didn't read the books or anything, I thought that he was going to die at the end of Dune 1. I thought the guy he fights was going to kill him, and then he was going to be reborn somehow. I don't know, on some crazy shit.
Are you talking about Austin Butler at the second one?
No.
The guy he fights in the first one?
Yeah. To where he kills him, and then that's how he becomes a part of the Fremen.
Oh, the mentor character, the character that in his visions was a mentor, and then he's like,
yeah, exactly.
Oh, I gotta kill him.
Yeah.
Which, that's so curious to me how, I do like that they obviously don't just ignore it in the second one, but it is curious to me kind of how that plays, because it doesn't really go anywhere. He kind of just sees him as a mentor figure.
I think it's him seeing possible futures to where
I guess he realizes that, not every future, his visions are entirely accurate, I guess.
Yeah, he has multiple outcomes he can see, so.
True, so I guess it does.
Yeah, that's kind of the idea, is he can.
Maybe that's why he wants to stay north, because he's like, these visions aren't guaranteed to be the future, so as long as I just stay over here, then. But it's so curious because there's kind of no way out of killing him to get the future that he wants to, or the future that he sees at least. There's no way out of.
I don't know the idea behind what future that is to where he is his mentor.
Exactly, yeah, and it kind of doesn't.
So that's why I thought watching Dune 1.
It.
Yeah, that's why I thought watching Dune 1. That's where it was going to go. That he loses the fight on purpose.
Yeah, that's kind of the future that happens, is that he loses, and then I see, and that would have been probably a complete movie in that scenario. You probably could have ended Dune 1 and been like, oh, interesting, and then been semi-satisfied as a movie, but instead he wins, and then you're like, well, where are we going? The Hans Zimmer, the way he composes all that fun stuff.
The first one, they had a problem in the first one where they were doing that way too much. They were walking through sand. Nothing's happening, and then it just cuts to the loudest singing you've ever heard.
So maxed out. You're like, Jesus Christ. And you could tell that they put a little bit more thought into it in this one, like with the Timothy and Zendaya scene with the helicopter, the music pauses. Like every time they're using the music and the sound, it feels very earned. Like these big sounds that are coming out of the screen are not the screen, the speakers are worth it. They're paid off. The loud explosions, the nuke going off, all of that is like very earned, and just the score alone, it just really brings you into the movie and kind of gives you an idea of the mood you're supposed to feel while watching some of these scenes. You're watching Timothy yell at everybody, and the music is giving you a cue of, oh, this is not good.
I thought that, yeah, there's like a lot of good sound effects to like in your favorite scene, like the action with the rocket launcher. I was like, yeah, that's pretty. It was loud. It was loud as fuck.
Very loud.
I don't think I can express this enough. Like when I was watching the movie, the sound effects were like actual explosions going off in my ear because it was just like you're just like, oh,
like, oh my god. Let me just, Jesus Christ. Yours sounded, I feel like yours was like maybe too loud, because mine at no point was it like that loud.
When the
like, it was loud.
yeah, when the little helicopter, whatever they're called, went down, that loud explosion noise was yeah.
I felt like a nuke was going off to you.
Yeah.
That's funny. I feel like I do feel like though, like stuff like that was earned. Like the 5-second silence you get before that earns the loud explosion that you hear during that. Granted, yours may have been a little bit too loud, but like mine wasn't to the point that it gave me almost this feeling of euphoria of like, wow, I'm really watching an expert work, you know?
Yeah.
And just the music, the way that it all like plays in, gives you a mood, gives you a feel of, gives you a tone of the scene you're watching just through the music and the visual alone is impressive, without having some dialogue to tell you why the character's sad, without having some dialogue to tell you why what's happening on screen is not good. The fact that it's able to communicate that with visual and audio alone it's just expert craftsmanship.
I agree.
So do we want to give this movie a score? Since
Well, before you jump into that,
okay,
I want to end it off saying my favorite things about it. You know what I mean? We'll do a little recap, I suppose.
Yeah.
All right. Javier Bardem.
We
haven't even touched over.
We haven't touched on him at all.
Fantastic.
I've heard some people say that they didn't like how his character, Stilgar, was borderline the comedic relief of this one, which I think that's fair.
No, I disagree. I thought it was awesome.
I also think it's awesome. And to add to it too, in the first one he's comedic relief. He spits on them and walks away, and then they all spit, and it's a funny thing that happens on screen.
There was one point in the movie that was really funny whenever he's like, that's exactly, he's like, he's being humble. That's exactly what he would do.
Yeah, it's exactly what Lisa Nagaib would do. What is the other, because and it confused me too, because he goes by like 3 names. Lisa Nagaib, the like one that starts with an M, and then like another one. All kind of meaning the same thing. It felt a little more consistent in this one, but in the first one, like when I rewatched it, I was like, what prophet is he? Because he's a prophet to the Ben Gesserit, the mothers.
Yeah.
He's a prophet to the Fremen. And then he's like this weird prophet to the Emperor too. And it's all kind of like...
I feel like the Emperor part is more on the Ben Gesserit than...
Very true. Very true. Because the mother...
So I think it's just the two.
It might just be...
Because you have your Fremen and you have your crazy ladies.
Yeah.
That's what I would describe them as.
The Karens.
Yeah.
They're the Karens of the Dune universe.
Austin Butler was another highlight. I feel like he added a lot to the movie, like
Absolutely.
a ton.
Absolutely. Javier Bardem added so much. The comedic timing, like even though like, and at the same time too, I like people equating him to comedic relief. I don't even fully think that. I think his characters, it's almost sad because you're watching him worship this character that's gonna bring the downfall of his own people. That he doesn't even realize is happening.
I think it was comedic relief in a natural way too, which was
very
nice
true
because it's not like any quips. It was just like a funny moment that the whole theater laughed whenever that was in there. So.
And his character is being so serious too. His character is fully being like he's humble. And to us it's funny, but to the other Fremen, he's being very serious. He's being like this is what he would do. And you know, it's funny to us because we know what Timothy is thinking, but him and the other Fremen do not.
Yeah.
And so because of that, it adds to it a lot. Like he's comedic relief, but not really.
Yeah, it was a nice contrast between. I like what I really like about it too is every character has their own point of interest and they do not easily get persuaded. It feels like everything is earned as far as like character development and growth goes.
Exactly.
So that's a big highlight.
The only sudden switch ups from any characters is after they drink the water of life, both the mom and Timothy.
Yeah.
But again, that's earned. They're drinking this worm juice that basically, like, you know, it turns them into a different person. That's the point of it.
Yeah. Another thing I didn't like, but I also just kind of found funny was the worst job of all time you could possibly have is being a what's the word? A counselor or a guidance person to the Harkonens, to where they just constantly keep getting their throats slit or like killed by
Yeah, you're just sitting there
Batista.
holding a tray, and then just because like someone else said something, you're just getting your throat slit, and you're like, oh, I'm dead now.
Yeah, it might have been in the first one too, where he was like, I advise you take a nap or something like that.
Yeah, yeah,
just
and
gets
then
killed.
just kills them, and that's
So.
definitely adds to it. Another things I liked, you know, the sound, the visuals, the craftsmanship of the movie, the way everything is shot. The story is good, but in my opinion, it's in the back seat, whereas the like craftsmanship of the movie itself, the production, the set design, the CGI, the audio mixing, the cinematography, all of that is kind of driving this movie, I feel like. And then, you know, it's a benefit too that we got a good story, but I definitely think the story is, not to say it's weak, but is a weaker point of the movie just because of how well everything else is.
I feel like, yeah, that's where, if there were things to drop for me, it would be the pacing of how, just overall, because you have to invest your time into the first one and into the second one to get a lot out of it.
And the first one is very slow.
I would be curious to see someone's opinion on who's only watched the second one, just to see how fucking lost they are or anything like that.
It's actually funny. One of my bosses at work only watched the second one, and he was like, I was down. I had some questions, but like whatever.
Yeah.
It was just so good. So that kind of goes into like, the second one kind of stands alone as a climax, and some people don't even need the setup to appreciate, and that kind of shows how good the climax is, because someone who hasn't watched the first one to really get the setup of why the climax is happening still saw the climax and was like, masterpiece.
Yeah.
So
I feel like maybe the pacing on a couple places is again where
a little bit weaker. It's, you have these long, slow scenes and these quick, fast ones, and I definitely think that those are some of the weaker points. Other thing I liked, the performances, all fantastic. I can't think of one actor that was weak. Even Jason Momoa in the first one, because he's not even in the second one, still is, as far as acting, does a fantastic job.
He wasn't in the second one? Am I just like...
Not at all. I don't think. He dies in the first one.
Yeah, I don't know. For some reason, I just remember him.
May thy knife chip and shatter.
Oh, last little quip, or not quip, but what do you call it? Like, it was a minor thing. It's like, why does Timothy Chalamet get to be stabbed 3 times and live? Austin Butler gets stabbed once, and like that's it.
Oh yeah, yeah. I've always, but you can say that with every movie.
Yeah, that's like totally
fatal wounds to the main character are never as bad as fatal wounds to an enemy.
It was just hard to be like, oh, he's dead.
Yeah, literally, I was like, all that for him to just die from one little stab.
Yeah, Timmy got stabbed here, like up over here somewhere, I think, and then
I think he got scratched on like the face.
Yeah,
but and that's unfortunately this movie falls victim to it as well, and quite literally Austin Butler's character. But I definitely think like, that's just movies.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to, you could point at any movie with a villain and a main character, and the hero's getting shot up, taking bullet holes, and the villain gets shot one time, like kind of near an artery, and you're like, oh, he's dead. It goes back to Star Wars. It goes back, like it's kind of hard to judge this movie for that when every movie borderline ever has had that effect, unless it's just straight up a movie where the hero doesn't win.
The final fight was sick though.
Final fight was sick as fuck.
Yeah.
It was, the dialogue between them, may thy knife chip and shatter, may thy knife chip and shatter. Austin Butler's character doesn't used to that tradition and still plays into it very well.
If you had to give it a rating 1 to 10, what would you go with?
Dune Part 1, 7.5. Second one, get a little crazy here. Saying 9.5.
Yeah, that is crazy.
I'm saying 9.5. I think like just so little of it is wrong to me.
I am going to give Part 1 a 6 out of 10, and I am going to give Part 2 an 8.5 out of 10.
Okay.
I think parts of what I like most about movies is characters getting to interact with each other and really like world build out. And I feel like Dune is a lot more on the visual side, so that's where it kind of you have the parts in the middle that I think that really took away from me is when it really starts like jumping ahead. I'm like, okay, this is very important part of a character's development, and we're, you know what I mean, like
skipping over it.
yeah,
I definitely
exactly.
do feel like that with the water of life scene. Like Timothy's switch up, I do like it did almost take me out of like, but it didn't help that I was again borderline falling asleep at that part. Again, not because the movie was boring, but like I vividly remember that scene because I almost was like, how did he get here?
9.5
Like,
out
why
of
did he
10. I
stop?
was falling asleep.
Again, not the movies because I didn't fall asleep.
Yeah.
If it was Oppenheimer, with the level of tired that I was, I would have fallen asleep.
So I feel like if they would have put a little more emphasis, because you got to think like this is a big defining moment between Zendaya and I was about to say Tom Holland and Timothy Chalamet's like breaking point to where
Yeah.
it starts to break off, and it is just like speed ran through, and now it's like okay, Zendaya's upset, rightfully so, but yeah, I don't know. There's parts I would have rather seen that get more like built out on.
Yeah,
So that,
absolutely.
I think that's where it kind of drops off from being like a 9 out of 10 to an 8.5.
Yeah.
It's a fun visual movie, but as far as like interactions go between characters, I think it can fall off a little bit. So.
What would you rate the whole part 1 and 2 as one 6-hour movie?
Probably like a 7.5.
7.5, just right in the middle.
I think
I'm gonna be a little controversial here. I might say a 10.
no shot.
I might say as one complete 6-hour movie, both of them benefit off of each other to boost each other to a 10, or still a 9.5, or still a 9.5.
Okay. Hey.
I think that this, you know what? 9.5.
I feel like
I think Dune Part 2 brings up Part 1 to its own level by existing. And so I think as a series, 9.5, I think there's some bits and pieces here that aren't perfect because it's not a perfect movie. Even as a 6-hour cut, it's not a perfect movie.
right.
But I do think like Part 1 having Part 2 already exist, which it didn't when it came out. So and I do have to judge it as its own individual movie, therefore 7.5. But I do think like with Part 2 existing makes Part 1 an even better movie.
I think only if they do make a third movie, that's the only thing that could really bring up
the whole score.
Because I think at its peak, it's probably like an 8.5. You get really cool visuals, and it's probably really sick if you're like really into that. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But for me, it's like it's a cool part of it. You know?
Yeah,
So.
absolutely. Yeah, you just kind of like because I'm someone who knows kind of a lot about the filmmaking process, so I do see like you watch Ant-Man Quantum Mania, you're like, they had $200 million. Where the fuck did it go?
Yeah.
Like, I'm just staring at green screen the whole time. Like, why is this $200 million? And I'm watching Dune 2, and I'm like, Dune Part 1 and 2 even. And I'm like, how are these, I'll just say Dune Part 2 because I don't know the budget of Dune Part 1, but Dune Part 2, I'm like, how is this only $190 million? When, again, that's not a small budget, but they're using it to its absolute value versus basically those Marvel movies wasting money by, I just don't like the way it looks, start from scratch. And so that $50,000 you spent for that shot, you're not even going to use it. So you're starting from scratch to then do the shot again, spending another $50,000. So I do think like, it's just the craftsmanship of it, I just have nothing but appreciation for.
Yeah. All right. That kind of wraps it up. We've talked for
a while.
Good amounts. Hopefully this turns out to something.
I hope so. Thanks for watching.
I'm gonna do the thing, you know what I mean, where you cut back and forth. That's gonna
be yeah.
Like and subscribe, all that bullshit. We'll try to do. I think we're talking about doing the Monster Universe.
Maybe the Monster Universe. If you have other ideas, Godzilla x Kong is, which Google that with safe search off.
I'd rather not. I think. I think I'll avoid that.
Not me.
Anyways, thanks for watching. I'll catch you on the next one. See you later.